I always believed that there's nothing more sacred than watching your child shine on stage. All those hours of practice, the sacrifice, the dedication, it's a parent's duty to be there, fully present, cherishing every moment. That's why when I discovered my husband had spent our daughter's championship performance transferring our life savings to his mistress, I realized some betrayals cut deeper than others. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I remember that evening like it was carved into my bones. Emma, our 14-year-old daughter, was about to perform her solo at the National Youth Ballet Competition. We'd spent years working toward this moment, countless early morning drives to practice, endless hours of her perfecting every movement, my extra shifts at the hospital to afford the best training possible. This was supposed to be her moment, our moment. The grand theater was packed, its gilded walls reflecting the soft glow of stage lights. I sat in the front row, my heart swelling, with pride as I watched Emma warming up backstage through the curtain's gap. She was grace personified in her white tutu, her long dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun, just like I'd done for her since she was 4. David, my husband of 16 years, sat beside me, but something felt off. He kept checking his phone, his fingers tapping nervously against his thigh. I brushed it off. He was probably just answering work emails again. After all, being a financial advisor meant he was always connected to his clients. At least, that's what I told myself. As the lights dimmed and the first notes of Tchaikovsky filled the air, I reached for David's hand. He pulled away, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. I frowned but kept my eyes fixed on the stage. This was Emma's moment, and nothing was going to distract me from it. Emma's performance was breathtaking. Every pirouette, every leap told a story of dedication, of dreams taking flight. Tears welled in my eyes as I watched our daughter command the stage, her movements fluid and precise. The audience was spellbound, and I was lost in the pure joy of witnessing my child's triumph. But David never returned to his seat. During the intermission, I felt my phone vibrate. A notification from our joint savings account, the one we'd been building for Emma's future, for her dreams of attending Juilliard. My hands trembled as I opened the banking app. The balance that should have read $127,000 now showed $802. Taylor, my world stopped spinning. The elegant theater, with its crystal chandeliers and velvet curtains, suddenly felt suffocating. I refreshed the app once, twice, 3 times. The numbers didn't change. There had to be a mistake. Then I saw it. A transfer made just 30 minutes ago, right as Emma was beginning her solo. The recipient's name burned into my vision. Catherine Wells. I knew that name. It belonged to the new client relations manager at David's firm, the one he'd been spending late nights with reviewing portfolios. The one whose name he'd murmured in his sleep last month, making me lie awake until dawn, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. My hands shook as I pulled up our other accounts. Empty. All of them. College fund, emergency savings, everything we'd built over 16 years of marriage, gone in the time it took our daughter to dance her heart out on stage. The second half of the performance was about to begin. Emma would be receiving her scores, potentially qualifying for the national championships. She would look for both her parents in the audience, expecting to see our proud faces, our unwavering support. I forced myself to breathe, to push down the scream building in my throat. This was still Emma's night. I wouldn't let David's betrayal steal this moment from her too. But as I sat there, watching our daughter take her final bow, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about a father choosing to destroy his daughter's future during the very moment she was reaching for her dreams. As the audience erupted in applause, as roses rained down on the stage, as Emma's radiant smile lit up the theater. I made a decision. David thought he had all the power, thought he could play with our lives like pieces on a chessboard. But he had forgotten something crucial. Before I was his wife, before I was Emma's mother, I was Dr. Sarah Chen, head of cybersecurity at Memorial Hospital. And if there's one thing I knew better than anyone, it was that in the digital age, everything leaves a trace. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening a different kind of app. One I hadn't used since my days working with the FBI's cybercrime unit. As Emma received her standing ovation, as the judges announced her advancement to nationals, as the audience cheered for my beautiful, talented daughter, I began to type. David had chosen this perfect moment to betray us. Now I would choose the perfect moment to make him regret it. The funny thing about working in hospital cybersecurity? You learn exactly how vulnerable financial systems can be. You understand precisely how digital footprints can never truly be erased. But most importantly, you know that timing is everything, just like in ballet. As I watched Emma bounce toward me after the show, her eyes shining with joy, her medal glinting under the theater lights, I smiled. She had just performed her best dance yet, and I was about to perform mine. The drive home from the theater was a masterclass in composure. Emma chattered excitedly in the back seat, clutching her medal and replaying every moment of her performance. I maintained my smile, nodded at all the right moments, while my mind raced through the digital labyrinth I was about to enter. Mom, where's Dad? He didn't even come backstage to congratulate me. Emma's voice cracked slightly, the first hint of disappointment creeping into her post-performance high. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. He had an emergency at work, sweetheart, I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. But I recorded everything. He'll watch it first thing tomorrow. Another lie. I hated myself for it. But sometimes protecting your child means shielding them from the truth, at least temporarily. After tucking Emma into bed, still glowing from her triumph, I retreated to my home office. The room, once a shared space where David and I would work late into the night, now felt like a crime scene. Every family photo on the wall, every shared moment captured in frames, seemed to mock me with their facade of happiness. I booted up my specialized laptop, the one I kept separate from our home network. Working in hospital cybersecurity teaches you to be paranoid, to always maintain secure, isolated systems. Tonight, that paranoia would serve a different purpose. The first step was following the money. David had always been meticulous with our finances. It was part of his job, after all. But even the most careful people leave traces. I pulled up our bank statements from the past 6 months, looking for patterns, irregularities, anything that might reveal how long this betrayal had been in the making. The screen's blue light illuminated my face as I dug deeper. Credit card, statements, investment accounts, everything. A pattern emerged, subtle at first, then glaringly obvious. Small transfers, carefully disguised as business expenses. Hotel charges in neighboring cities. Expensive restaurants where we'd never eaten. A second phone line I'd never known about. My hands trembled as I created a spreadsheet, documenting every suspicious transaction. The betrayal hadn't started today. It had been building for months, maybe even years. David had been bleeding. Our accounts slowly, testing the waters, preparing for this final act of treachery. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. 3 days ago, David had opened a new account in the Cayman Islands. The paperwork was immaculate, every detail carefully planned. He'd been preparing his escape route, making sure the money would be untraceable once he transferred it. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd used our home network to set it up. In my line of work, I'd seen countless affairs exposed through digital footprints. Emails, messages, location data. Technology has a way of preserving our secrets, even when we think we've covered our tracks. I began running recovery software on our home router's logs, piecing together David's digital movements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Hours passed as I worked, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Email fragments emerged from deleted accounts, messages recovered from cloud, backups, locations pieced together from GPS data. A complete picture of betrayal, rendered in ones and zeros. Catherine Wells wasn't just David's mistress. She was his accomplice. They'd been planning this for months. The timing of the transfer during Emma's recital wasn't just cruel, it was strategic. They'd assumed I'd be too distracted by the performance to notice until it was too late. As I dug deeper into Catherine's background, something else caught my eye. She wasn't who she claimed to be. Her employment history had gaps, unexplained, periods that coincided with several investment fraud cases in other states. She'd changed her name 3 times in the past decade. David hadn't just betrayed us, he'd been conned by a professional. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing with possibilities. The old me, the one who existed before tonight, would have called the police, filed reports, followed proper procedures. But that version of me died the moment David chose to destroy our daughter's future. My phone buzzed, a text from David. "Working late, don't wait up." I glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. Through my specialized tracking software, I could see his real location. The Grand Marina Hotel, room 742, paid for with our daughter's college fund. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my next move. That's when I heard it. Soft crying from down the hall. I found Emma in her room, still in her competition outfit, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her phone. "Emma? Honey, what's wrong?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. Dad's credit card was just declined. The deposit for the national championship training camp. It didn't go through. "Mom, if I can't secure my spot by tomorrow morning, they'll give it to someone else." The national championship, Emma's dream, the culmination of years of hard work. The training camp alone cost $15,000, a deposit we'd planned to pay tonight after her performance. David knew this. He'd known exactly what he was destroying. I hugged my daughter close, feeling her body shake with sobs. "Don't worry, sweetie, I'll take care of it, I promise." After Emma finally fell asleep, I returned to my office with renewed purpose. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about protecting my daughter's future from both David and his fraudulent girlfriend. I cracked my knuckles and began to work. First, I accessed David's private email server, the one he thought was secure. Within minutes, I had every communication between him and Catherine from the past year. Their plans, their secret accounts, their intended escape route, everything. But I didn't stop there. I dove into Catherine's past, using skills I'd developed tracking cybercriminals for the FBI. Her previous identities emerged: Maria Torres in Florida, Susan Blake in Texas, Elizabeth Carter in Nevada. Each name associated with investment scams, each time disappearing with millions just before the authorities caught up. I worked methodically, carefully, building a digital trail that even the most skilled investigator could follow. Every fraudulent transaction, every false identity, every stolen dollar, I documented it all. But I didn't just gather evidence. I began setting up triggers, digital tripwires that would activate at exactly the right moment. As the sun began to rise, I finally sat back, my plan complete. David thought he was clever, using our daughter's biggest moment as cover for his betrayal. He thought technology would help him disappear with our money, start a new life with his fraudulent lover. But he'd forgotten what I did for a living. He'd forgotten that in the digital age, nothing truly disappears. And most importantly, he'd forgotten that hell hath no fury like a mother protecting her child's dreams. I looked at the complex web of programs I'd set up, each one waiting for my command. Then I glanced at the photo on my desk. Emma at her first recital, 7 years old, beaming with joy. David had missed that performance too, claiming work obligations. I should have seen the pattern sooner. My phone buzzed again, another text from David. Meetings running long, might not make it home tonight. I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that would have surprised anyone who knew me as the calm, professional Dr. Chen. Because while David was crafting his lies, while he was counting his stolen money, while he was planning his great escape, I had just finished programming his downfall. The sun rose fully over the horizon, painting my office in shades of gold. In a few hours, Emma would wake up, still worried about her training camp deposit. But by then, everything would be different. Because while my daughter had spent years perfecting her dance moves, I had spent years perfecting something else, the art of digital warfare. And David was about to learn that some performances are best served cold. I waited until Emma left for her morning practice session before making my first move. The clock on my office wall ticked steadily as I watched David's location marker on my screen, still at the Grand Marina Hotel, room 742. Perfect. First, I needed to force a confrontation on my terms. I picked up my phone and sent a simple text. We need to talk about Emma's training camp deposit, now. 3 dots appeared immediately. David was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Finally, can't talk now. In meetings all day. We'll handle it tonight. I smiled grimly at my screen. Interesting. Those must be some important meetings in room 742 at the Grand Marina. Should I come up? I'm sure Catherine would love to join. Our discussion about our daughter's future. Silence. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. Then my phone exploded with incoming messages. How did you... Sarah, I can explain. This isn't what you think. Don't do anything rash. I leaned back in my chair, watching his panic unfold in real time. Through my tracking software, I could see him pacing the hotel room, his phone connecting to different Wi-Fi access points as he moved. Catherine's phone was there too, her digital signature betraying their shared location. You have 1 hour, I texted back. Meet me at Riverside Coffee. Come alone, or the next message goes to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I'm sure they'd be very interested in Catherine's history as Maria Torres, Susan Blake, and Elizabeth Carter. More silence. Then a single word. Okay. Riverside Coffee was neutral ground, a busy cafe where we'd once spent Sunday mornings as a family. Now it would serve as the stage for Act 1 of my carefully choreographed performance. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that gave me a clear view of both entrances, while keeping my laptop screen hidden from prying eyes. David arrived exactly on time, looking immaculate in his tailored suit, paid for with our money, no doubt. His confident stride faltered when he saw me, replaced by the nervous shuffle of a man who'd been caught. He'd always been terrible at hiding his emotions. It's why he'd needed someone like Catherine to help him plan this betrayal. Sarah, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. If you say, this isn't what you think one more time, I cut him off. I'll send copies of Catherine's fraud records to every client in your firm's database. His face paled. You wouldn't. You stole our daughter's future during her biggest performance, I replied, my voice steady. You don't get to tell me what I would or wouldn't do anymore. I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. On the screen was a detailed spreadsheet of every transaction he'd made in the past year. Every hotel booking, every secret purchase, every transfer to Catherine's various aliases. How did you... He started. I protect hospital networks from cyber criminals for a living, David. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you using our home Wi-Fi to set up offshore accounts? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between my face and the screen. Look, I know this looks bad, but Catherine... Catherine? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. You mean Maria? Or Susan? Or Elizabeth? How many names has your girlfriend used while scamming men like you? What are you talking about? I pulled up another document, this one, filled with police reports, news articles, and mugshots. Different names, same face. Catherine's face. David's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he scrolled through the evidence. She's not a professional con artist who's stolen millions from investment advisors across 3 states? That's exactly what she is. And you just handed her our entire savings, our daughter's college fund, everything we built together. The color drained from his face as reality finally began to sink in. I can fix this, he stammered. I'll call Catherine, get the money back. The money's already gone, I said quietly. She transferred it out of the Cayman account an hour after you deposited it, but that's not why I called you here. I turned my laptop back around, typing in a few commands. Right now, Emma is at practice, trying to hide how heartbroken she is that her father missed her performance. She's trying to figure out how to tell her instructors she can't attend the training camp that could define her future. Our daughter, who has never asked for anything except our support, is having her dreams crushed because you couldn't keep it in your pants. Sarah, please. I'm not finished, I continued, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. You have exactly one chance to make this right, one chance to be the father Emma deserves. David leaned forward, desperation written across his face. Anything. I'll do anything. Good. Because in exactly 10 minutes, Catherine is going to receive an email containing proof of all her previous identities and crimes. In 11 minutes, every client in your firm's database will receive documentation of how their trusted financial advisor was conned by a known fraudster. In 12 minutes, the FBI will get an anonymous tip about Catherine's location and activities. David's face went from pale to ashen. You'll ruin me. No, David. You ruined yourself. I'm just deciding how far the debris spreads. I turned the laptop to show him a timer counting down. But I'm giving you a choice. Transfer every penny you have left, your personal accounts, your retirement fund, everything, into Emma's name right now, and I'll stop the countdown. That's blackmail, he whispered. That's consequences, I corrected. You chose to betray our family during Emma's performance. I'm choosing to give you one last chance to be a father during her time of need. He stared at the countdown, sweat beading on his forehead. And if I refuse? Then in 13 minutes, Emma receives an email explaining exactly why she can't attend her training camp, complete with photos of her father and his fraudulent girlfriend spending her future. David's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. How do I know you'll stop it? You don't. But unlike you, I'm doing this for our daughter. The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking. I watched as David frantically logged into his accounts, his fingers trembling as he initiated transfers. With each passing minute, his breathing grew more ragged, his movements more desperate. The man who had so confidently betrayed us was crumbling before my eyes. But this was just the beginning. Because while David sat there, sacrificing his personal wealth to save his reputation, he had no idea that the real performance was yet to come. Catherine might have gotten away with our savings, but I had spent the night preparing a digital ballet of my own, one that would ensure she wouldn't get to enjoy her ill-gotten gains for long. As David completed the last transfer, I smiled. Act 1 was complete. Now it was time for the real show to begin. After David left Riverside Coffee, shoulders slumped in defeat, I remained at the corner table, watching the timer on my laptop. In exactly 20 minutes, Emma would finish her morning practice. Despite everything that had happened, she hadn't missed a single session. That's the kind of dedication my daughter possessed. The drive that David had so carelessly gambled with. My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone was trying to access our home network remotely. Catherine, no doubt, attempting to erase evidence of their scheme. I smiled, remembering the sophisticated honeypot I'd set up overnight. Let her try. Every attempt to breach our system would only give me more breadcrumbs to follow. What I didn't expect was the message that popped up on my screen. Nice trap setup, Dr. Chen. Mind if we talk? The message came from an encrypted channel, bouncing through multiple proxies. Someone skilled was reaching out. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. Who is this? I typed back. Someone who's been tracking Catherine Wells for the past 2 years. Check your email. I opened my secure email account to find a message from an anonymous sender. Inside were detailed files on Catherine's previous scams. Information even I hadn't uncovered in my night of investigation. Bank statements, surveillance photos, witness statements. Whoever this was had built an extensive case. I'm listening. I responded. Meet me at the hospital. Your office. 30 minutes. I hesitated. This could be a trap, but my curiosity was piqued. Besides, the hospital was my territory. Every security camera, every access point, every digital system was under my control. If this was Catherine's attempt at countering my moves, she'd chosen the wrong battlefield. The hospital corridors were quiet when I arrived, the morning shift change creating a lull in activity. I entered my office, immediately noticing something was different. My chair was turned toward the window, and in it sat a woman I'd seen countless times but never really noticed. Carol Martinez, the quiet forensic accountant from the hospital's fraud department. Hello, Sarah, she said, turning to face me. Or should I say, fellow Catherine Wells victim. I closed the door, studying her carefully. Carol had worked at the hospital for 3 years, always polite but reserved, keeping to herself. Now looking at her more closely, I saw the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the subtle tension in her posture. 2 years ago, she continued, Catherine Wells was Elizabeth Carter. She was also my sister-in-law, and she destroyed my brother's life the same way she's trying to destroy yours. Carol pulled out a thumb drive, placing it on my desk. I've been tracking her since she disappeared with my brother's life savings. Different names, different cities, same pattern. She finds successful professionals, preferably in finance. Uses their own expertise to help her move money untraceably. Makes them think they're in control until it's too late. I sat down, processing this information. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're the first person who's caught her in the act. Everyone else discovered the truth too late, after she'd vanished with the money. But you, Carol smiled, a predatory expression that transformed her entire face. You've got her cornered, and I want to help. I opened my laptop, pulling up my tracking program. Catherine's phone signal was still active, now moving through downtown. She hasn't left yet because she's waiting for the last transfer from David's Cayman account, I explained. Once that clears, she'll disappear again. Carol leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Not this time. What you did last night, setting up those digital tripwires? That was good. But with my evidence combined with yours, we can do better. We can end her whole operation. For the next hour, Carol and I compared notes, merged our intelligence. Her meticulous financial tracking combined with my cybersecurity expertise painted a complete picture of Catherine's operation. We discovered she wasn't working alone. She had a network, other con artists who helped her set up fake identities and move money through shell companies. The problem was never catching her, Carol explained, pulling up documents on her tablet. It was proving intent. She's careful to always have her victims initiate transfers themselves. Makes it look like willing participation rather than fraud. But David did it during Emma's recital, I mused, an idea forming. The timing, the location. Exactly, Carol nodded. No judge would believe someone willingly chose to drain their child's college fund during their daughter's performance. It shows coercion, manipulation, and with your digital evidence of her previous identities. We can prove pattern and intent, I finished, excitement building. But why help me? Why not turn this over to the FBI yourself? Carol's expression darkened. Because the FBI moves too slowly. By the time they build a case, she's gone. You've got her trapped now, today. And she hesitated. I saw your daughter perform last night. I was there because I'd tracked Catherine to the theater. When I realized what was happening, that she was about to destroy another family during such a precious moment, you decided to reach out, I concluded. Catherine Wells has ruined enough lives, Carol said firmly. She used my brother's love against him, just like she used your husband's. Weakness against your family. It's time someone used her own methods against her. I studied Carol's face, seeing the same cold determination I felt in my own heart. What exactly are you proposing? Carol pulled out another thumb drive. I have access to the hospital's financial record system. You have the cybersecurity expertise to make our moves untraceable. Together, we can set up a trap that even Catherine's network can't escape. That's not exactly legal, I pointed out. Neither is what she did to our families, Carol countered. Sometimes justice needs a helping hand. Besides, she smiled, that predatory smile again. Everything we do will be completely deniable. That's one thing I learned from Catherine. Always have plausible deniability. I thought about Emma, about her dreams, about the moment her father chose to betray her. Then I thought about Carol's brother and how many other families Catherine had destroyed. Sometimes fighting fire with fire isn't just an option, it's a necessity. All right, I said, pulling up my command console. Let's give Catherine a taste of her own medicine. Carol's eyes lit up as she connected her thumb drive. I was hoping you'd say that. Now let me show you what I've learned about Catherine's real weakness, her pride. As we began working, combining our skills and knowledge, I realized something. David's betrayal hadn't just cost us our savings. It had inadvertently connected me with someone who could help me take Catherine down permanently. Sometimes the most powerful allies come from unexpected places, born from shared pain and a common desire for justice. The next phase of my plan was taking shape, more elaborate and devastating than I'd originally imagined. With Carol's help, Catherine Wells was about to learn that hell hath no fury like two women scorned. As Carol and I sat in my office, methodically piecing together our plan, alarms suddenly flashed across my monitor. Catherine was making her move. Large transfers were being initiated from multiple accounts simultaneously. She's starting her exit strategy, Carol observed, her eyes narrowing at the screen. Earlier than her usual pattern. I pulled up the transaction logs, my fingers flying across the keyboard. She's spooked. The way David folded at the cafe, she knows something's wrong. Multiple windows populated my screen, each showing different money trails. Look at this. She's bouncing the funds through 17 different shell companies. Classic Catherine, Carol muttered, pulling out her notebook filled with detailed financial diagrams. She always uses prime numbers for her transfer chains, makes it harder to trace patterns. The next few hours became a masterclass in financial warfare. Carol's experience tracking Catherine merged seamlessly with my cybersecurity expertise. We weren't just following her money. We were setting up a digital maze that would lead her exactly where we wanted. The key, Carol explained, sketching out a complex flowchart, is to make her think she's winning. Catherine's biggest weakness is her ego. She doesn't just want to steal the money, she wants to prove she's the smartest person in the room. I nodded, understanding dawning. So we let her think she's outsmarting us. Exactly. Each time she moves the money, we'll let her see a small trace of our tracking. She'll get cocky, think she's staying one step ahead, while actually following the path we've laid out, I finished, admiring the elegance of the strategy. But we need something more, something personal. Carol raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? I pulled up Emma's recital video on my screen. She chose to steal from us during my daughter's performance. Let's use that. Every parent in The competitive dance world follows the same social media accounts, reads the same blogs. You want to make it public? Carol's eyes widened. That's risky. Catherine usually abandons operations at the first sign of exposure. Not this time, I said, my voice hard. Because this time, we're not just going to expose her crime, we're going to expose her failure. I began typing, crafting posts that would appear on key dancing community forums. Rising Stars' Dreams saved by anonymous donor after father's betrayal. The story would be irresistible. A talented young dancer, a father's betrayal, and a mysterious benefactor stepping in to fund her training camp. Catherine's pride won't let her walk away if she thinks someone else has outsmarted her, I explained. She'll have to know who interfered with her perfect plan. Carol slowly smiled, understanding blooming in her eyes. And when she investigates, she'll find exactly what we want her to find. I pulled up another screen, showing a complex web of transactions. An offshore account in the Caymans, similar to the one David set up, but with a crucial difference. This one has an obvious security flaw. A honeypot, Carol breathed. Beautiful. She won't be able to resist. For the next several hours, we constructed our trap with meticulous precision. Every detail had to be perfect, every digital breadcrumb carefully placed. Catherine wasn't just any con artist. She was someone who had perfected her craft over years, destroying lives across multiple states. I set up a series of ghost accounts, each one appearing more secure than the last. Carol provided insights into Catherine's typical probe patterns, helping me craft vulnerabilities that would appeal specifically to her methodology. We weren't just creating a trap. We were composing a symphony of digital deception. There's one thing we haven't discussed, Carol said as we finalized the last details. What about your husband? I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. David. In the intensity of planning Catherine's downfall, I'd almost forgotten about him. Almost. He's not my concern anymore, I said quietly. Once Catherine's dealt with, once Emma's future is secure, I'll handle David. Carol studied me for a moment. He'll try to come back, you know. Once he realizes Catherine played him, he'll want to reconcile. They always do. I thought about the look on David's face at the cafe, the way he'd crumbled when confronted with the truth. He wasn't the man I'd married, not anymore. Maybe he never was. Let him try, I said, turning back to my screen. But first, we need to finish this. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mom, you won't believe it. The training camp. Called. They said an anonymous donor covered not just the deposit, but the entire program. Did you do this? I showed Carol the message, a grim smile on my face. And now we wait. Sure enough, within minutes, our monitoring systems detected increased activity. Catherine was searching, probing, trying to identify the mysterious donor. Her digital fingerprints were all over our carefully crafted false trails. She's taking the bait, Carol confirmed, watching the activity logs. Look at these search patterns. She's already trying to trace the training camp payment. I leaned back, allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. How long until she finds our honeypot account? Given her usual methodology, Carol consulted her notes. I'd say within the next 12 hours. She's thorough. Perfect. I began initiating the final phase of our preparations. That gives us exactly enough time to set up the endgame. As we worked, I couldn't help but think about Emma, about how her father's betrayal had inadvertently set in motion something much bigger than our family drama. Catherine Wells had spent years perfecting her craft, using people's trust and love against them. Now, she was about to learn that some betrayals have consequences that reach far beyond their intended victims. Carol, I said, as we put the finishing touches on our plan, thank you for helping me, for sharing your knowledge. She cut me off with a wave of her hand. Save your thanks for when we've finished this. Catherine Wells has spent too long thinking she's untouchable. It's time someone showed her that even the best con artists can be conned. I nodded, turning back to my screens. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for Catherine's pride to lead her exactly where we wanted her to go. One more thing, Carol added, her voice taking on a harder edge. When this is over, when we've taken her down, I want to be there when she realizes who did it. I want to see her face when she understands that the quiet accountant she never noticed was her downfall. I looked at Carol, seeing the years of pain and determination behind her eyes. We'll both be there, I promised. After all, every performance needs an audience. The trap was sprung sooner than we expected. At exactly 3:47 a.m., my security system pinged with an alert. Catherine had found our honeypot account. I was still awake, monitoring the feeds from my home office, when Carol's message came through. She's taking the bait, hard. I watched in real time as Catherine's digital fingerprints appeared all over our fabricated system. She was good. Her probes were subtle, her tracking methods sophisticated. But we were better. Every move she made was being logged, every attempt at access carefully documented. She's using a new algorithm to try to breach the security, I texted Carol, more aggressive than her usual pattern. She's rattled, Carol replied. The training. Camp donation got under her skin, just like we planned. I pulled up multiple screens, watching as Catherine attempted to trace the mysterious donation. The false trails we'd laid led her through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts, each one seemingly more secure than the last. But they all led to one destination, our trap. At 4:15 a.m., she made her first major move, a series of probing transactions, testing the waters of our honeypot account. I almost admired her technique. She was thorough, methodical, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd successfully conducted these scams for years. She's found the vulnerability we planted, I messaged Carol. Starting phase 1. The first phase of our plan was simple but crucial. As Catherine attempted to access our fabricated account, she'd find what appeared to be a small security flaw, a seemingly accidental gap in the encryption that would allow her to trace the source of the training camp donation. What she didn't know was that every probe, every attempt at access, was being mirrored to multiple secure servers. We weren't just tracking her movements, we were building an irrefutable case. My phone buzzed, David calling. I declined the call, watching as his text messages flooded in. Sarah, something's wrong with my accounts. All my cards are being declined. My online banking isn't working. What did you do? I smiled grimly. Right on schedule. While Catherine was busy trying to breach our honeypot, our secondary programs were quietly working in the background, systematically freezing every account connected to her operation, including the ones David didn't know she'd created in his name. Dr. Chen, my secure messenger pinged. Carol, using our agreed-upon formal address for sensitive communications. You need to see this. She sent over a stream of data. Catherine had just attempted to move a large sum of money from one of her hidden accounts. But instead of reaching its intended destination, the funds were now trapped in digital limbo, bouncing between the false routing numbers we'd planted in the system. How long until she realizes? I asked. Given the complexity of the transfer. Chain? At least 3 hours. By then it'll be too late. I checked the time, 4:45 a.m. Emma would be up in 2 hours for her morning practice. She was still floating on the high of her mysterious benefactor, completely unaware of the digital war being waged over her future. That's when I saw it. A new notification on my screen. Catherine was attempting to access the hospital's financial network. I sat up straighter, fingers flying across the keyboard. This wasn't part of the expected pattern. Carol, are you seeing this? Yes. She's trying to backtrack the training camp payment through our system. She thinks the donation came from hospital funds. Should we block her? There was a pause then. No, let her in. Level 3 access only. Let's see what she does with it. I adjusted our security protocols, creating a controlled environment for Catherine to explore. It was like watching a mouse in a maze, thinking it was finding its own path while actually following our carefully laid route. At 5:23 a.m., Catherine made her first crucial mistake. In her haste to trace the donation, she used one of her previous aliases to attempt a higher-level system access. It was exactly what we'd been waiting for. Got her, I messaged Carol. Maria Torres just tried to breach a secure medical database using Elizabeth Carter's credentials. Perfect. Initiating Phase 2. Phase 2 was where things would get interesting. While Catherine was distracted by her hunt through the hospital's systems, our real program was quietly infiltrating every account she'd ever created. Every alias, every false identity, every hidden fund, all of them now vulnerable to our counterattack. My phone buzzed again. More messages from David. Sarah, I can't access any of my accounts. My credit cards are all suspended. The bank is asking about suspicious activities. Please, you have to help me. I left his messages unanswered. David had made his choice during Emma's recital. Now he got to experience what it felt like to have your financial life destroyed in real time. At 6 a.m., exactly as planned, our first major strike began. Every account Catherine had touched in the past 3 years suddenly reported suspicious activity. Every bank she'd used, every financial institution she'd scammed, every credit card she'd opened, all of them simultaneously flagged for potential fraud. It's starting, Carol messaged. Her entire network is lighting up like a Christmas tree. I watched the chaos unfold across my screens. Catherine was good at covering her tracks, but nobody's perfect. Every time she'd accessed an account, every transfer she'd made had left microscopic digital fingerprints. Now those fingerprints were being matched across thousands of databases. How long until total lockdown? I asked. At this rate? Minutes. She's trying to stop it, but she can't be everywhere at once. I could almost picture Catherine's panic as she realized what was happening. The carefully constructed house of cards she'd built over years of scams was collapsing, one account at a time. At 6:15 a.m., my security system pinged again. Catherine had abandoned all pretense of subtlety and was now attempting a brute force attack on our systems. It was the digital equivalent of throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. She's desperate, Carol noted. This isn't her usual methodology at all. Good, I replied. Desperate people make mistakes. Right on cue, Catherine tried to initiate a mass transfer, attempting to move whatever funds she could still access to a new set of accounts. But we were ready. Each transfer was intercepted, redirected, and trapped in an endless loop of verification requests. By 6:30 a.m., the first phase of our counterattack was complete. Catherine's entire financial network was effectively paralyzed. Every account she'd created, every alias she'd used, every dollar she'd stolen, all of it now frozen in digital amber. As Emma's alarm went off down the hall, signaling the start of another day of practice, I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 had gone perfectly. Now it was time for the real performance to begin. Mom, have you seen the dance forums? Emma burst into my home office at 7:15 a.m., her practice bag slung over her shoulder, phone in hand. Everyone's talking about the mysterious donation. They're calling it the ballet benefactor story. I minimized my screens, hiding the digital warfare that had been raging all night. Really? That's interesting, sweetie. Look! She thrust her phone at me, showing a trending hashtag #ballet benefactor. The story had spread faster than even Carol and I had anticipated. Dance moms across the country were sharing and commenting, the tale of betrayal and anonymous generosity striking a chord in the competitive dance community. What Emma didn't know was that every share, every comment, every hashtag was another nail in Catherine's coffin. Each post made it harder for her to operate in the shadows, harder to vanish and reinvent herself as she'd done so many times before. As soon as Emma left for practice, my phone lit up with a message from Carol. Turn. On the news. Channel 7. I flicked on the small TV in my office, and there it was. Our story had made the morning news. Mystery surrounds local dance prodigy's salvation, the anchor announced. After a devastating financial betrayal, an anonymous donor steps in to save young talent's dreams. They took the bait, Carol messaged. Catherine's watching too. Her IP just accessed the news station's website. Right on schedule, my security system detected multiple attempts to trace the donation through various financial networks. Catherine was scrambling, her usual methodical approach replaced by increasingly desperate moves. That's when the first domino really fell. At 8:23 a.m., the fraud department at First National Bank flagged suspicious activities across multiple accounts. By 8:45 a.m., 3 other major banks had joined in. The algorithms we'd planted were doing their job, connecting dots that had been carefully kept separate for years. My phone buzzed, David again. This time, I answered. Sarah! His voice was panicked. Something's happening. The FBI just called my office. They're asking questions about Catherine, about transfers, about everything. How unfortunate, I replied calmly. Sounds like you backed the wrong horse. David, please, he begged. You have to help me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who she really was. Like you didn't know it was our daughter's college fund you were transferring. Like you didn't know it was her recital night? My voice remained steady, but ice crept into every word. Deal with it, David. Isn't that what you always said? I hung up as another alert flashed across my screen. Catherine had just tried to access one of her backup accounts in Switzerland. Instead of finding her safety net, she found a frozen account and a notification of pending investigation. She's running out of options, Carol messaged. Time for phase 3? I checked my monitors. Every escape route we'd anticipated was blocked. Every alias was flagged. Every account was either frozen or under investigation. Catherine Wells, or whatever her real name was finally cornered. Do it, I replied. Phase 3 was Carol's masterpiece. While I'd been focusing on the technical aspects, she'd been preparing something far more personal. At exactly 9 a.m., every client in David's firm received an email detailing how their trusted financial advisor had been compromised by a known fraudster. The response was immediate and devastating. David's phone started ringing nonstop. His professional reputation, built over decades, crumbled in minutes. But that wasn't the real target. By 9:15 a.m., similar emails went out to every financial firm Catherine had ever infiltrated under her various aliases. Each message contained just enough information to connect her different identities, just enough proof to make her toxic in the financial world. Check your email, Carol messaged. You're going to want to see this. I opened my inbox to find a video attachment. Security footage from the Grand Marina Hotel showing Catherine in a complete meltdown. She was at the front desk, screaming about her declined cards, about frozen accounts, about calling her lawyer. The calm, sophisticated con artist was gone, replaced by a woman watching her carefully constructed world implode. But we weren't done, not even close. At 9:30 a.m., every dance mom who had shared the ballet benefactor story received an anonymous tip. Photos of Catherine with various married men, including David, all taken during previous scams. The competitive dance community, already invested in Emma's story, exploded with righteous fury. She's trying to leave the hotel, Carol reported. But her Uber account is blocked, her cards are declined, and every taxi company in the city just received an alert about credit card fraud under her known aliases. I watched through the hotel's security feeds as Catherine paced the lobby, her designer outfit and perfectly styled hair contrasting sharply with her increasingly frantic behavior. She kept checking her phone, probably watching in horror as her life unraveled in real time. Sarah, Carol's message carried a note of satisfaction. It's time for the finale. I nodded to myself, opening the final program we'd prepared. With a few keystrokes, I activated our endgame. Every law enforcement agency that had ever investigated one of Catherine's aliases suddenly received an anonymous data dump, complete, with transaction records, correspondence, and irrefutable proof of her various identities. The effect was instantaneous. By 10 a.m., Catherine Wells wasn't just broke. She was infamous. Her face was plastered across financial news websites, law enforcement bulletins, and social media. The woman who had spent years operating in shadows was now exposed in the harsh light of public scrutiny. "Mom!" Emma's voice called from downstairs. "Can you come here? There's something weird on TV." I descended to find Emma staring at the living room television, where a breaking news banner scrolled across the screen. Major financial fraud ring exposed, multiple states involved. Catherine's various mugshots flashed across the screen, along with David's firm's name and the estimated total of her stolen funds. Emma looked at me, her eyes wide. "Mom, isn't that Dad's girlfriend?" I sat beside my daughter, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetie, it is. And I think it's time we had a talk about what really happened during your recital." As I held my daughter, my phone buzzed one final time, a message from Carol. "It's done. Catherine just got picked up by the FBI in the hotel lobby. Want to grab coffee and watch the perp walk?" I smiled, hugging Emma tighter. "Later," I replied. "Right now, I'm watching something much more important." The dominoes had fallen exactly as planned. Catherine's empire was in ruins. David's betrayal was exposed. And most importantly, Emma's future was secure. Sometimes I realized the best revenge isn't just about destroying your enemies. It's about making sure they destroy themselves. The next 24 hours unfolded like a perfectly choreographed performance. While Catherine sat in FBI custody, her world continued to crumble piece by piece. Carol and I watched from my office as years of careful deception unraveled in real time. "Look at this," Carol said, turning her laptop toward me. The screen showed a cascade of news alerts from various financial institutions. Every bank she ever dealt with is conducting internal audits. They're finding traces of her previous identities everywhere. I nodded, scanning my own monitors. The algorithm we planted is still running. It's connecting transactions from 3 years ago to accounts she opened last week. She didn't just leave breadcrumbs. She left an entire digital trail. But amid the satisfaction of watching Catherine's downfall, reality was knocking at my door. Literally. At 2:15 p.m., David showed up at the house. I watched through the security cameras as he stood on our porch, looking nothing like the confident financial advisor he'd once been. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his whole demeanor that of a man watching his life implode. "Mom?" Emma called from her room. "Dad's outside. Should I let him in?" I took a deep breath. This conversation was inevitable, but it would happen on my terms. "Stay upstairs, honey. I'll handle this." When I opened the door, David almost fell forward, as if he'd been leaning on it. "Sarah, please," he started, his voice cracking. "Everything's falling apart. The firm is suspending me pending investigation. Clients are pulling their accounts. The FBI has been questioning me for hours." "Sounds stressful," I replied coolly. "Maybe you should take a vacation." "Oh, wait." He flinched at the reference to his planned getaway with Catherine. "I was an idiot, okay? I admit it. I let her manipulate me. I let her convince me to—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "To steal from your daughter during her biggest performance?" I finished for him. "To betray your family for a con artist?" "I'll fix it," he pleaded. "I'll find a way to get the money back. I'll make it right." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him step back. "Fix it? David, do you even understand what's happening? Every transaction you made, every account you opened, every dollar you moved. It's all being investigated. The FBI isn't just looking at Catherine, they're looking at you." His face paled. "But I was a victim too. She conned me." "Did she con you into missing Emma's performances? Did she con you into lying to your family for months? Did she con you into setting up secret accounts long before you met her?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "The timing of that final transfer, David. During Emma's solo. That was your choice." He slumped against the doorframe. "Sarah, please, I need help. My accounts are frozen, my cards are declined, I can't even get a hotel room. Just let me stay here while I sort this out." "Let you stay here?" I repeated incredulously. "In the home you were willing to sacrifice? With the family you betrayed? Dad?" We both turned to see Emma standing at the top of the stairs, still in her practice clothes, her face a mixture of confusion and hurt. David straightened up. "Emma, sweetheart, I can explain everything." "Can you explain why you weren't there?" she asked quietly. "Not just at the recital, but at all my practices, my preliminaries. Everything this past year? I was busy with work, with clients. With Catherine?" Emma's voice cracked slightly. "I saw the news, Dad. I saw what you did with our money. My money." David took a step toward the stairs. "Princess, please, don't." Emma's voice was stronger now, harder. "You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to pretend you care now that everyone knows what you did." I watched my daughter, pride mixing with heartache. She stood tall, chin raised, showing the same strength and grace she displayed on stage. "Emma," David tried again. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your father." "No," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "A father would have been there. A father would have protected my future, not stolen it. You're just—" She paused, then delivered the final blow. "You're just the man who proved Mom right about trust being earned, not given." David staggered as if he'd been physically struck. Emma turned and walked back to her room, closing the door with a quiet click that somehow echoed louder than any slam could have. "You did this," David whispered, turning to me. "You turned her against me." "No, David. You did this to yourself. Every missed performance, every lie, every betrayal. Those were your choices. I just made sure the consequences caught up with you." His expression darkened. "The FBI agent mentioned something about hospital records, about traced IP addresses. That was you, wasn't it? You helped them track Catherine." I smiled, cold and precise. "Prove it." "I'll tell them. I'll tell them you hacked accounts, planted evidence." "With what proof?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Everything that happened is perfectly documented, perfectly legal. Catherine's crimes, your willing participation, it's all there in black and white. But my involvement? That's just the desperate theory of a man who got caught betraying his family." David's shoulders slumped as the truth of his situation finally sank in. He had nothing. No money, no reputation, no family, not even a place to sleep. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice small. I thought about all the times he'd dismissed my concerns, all the times he'd told me to deal with it when I caught him in small lies, building up to this massive betrayal. "I don't know, David," I replied, stepping back into the house. "But I'm sure you'll figure something out, after all." I began closing the door. "That's what you always told me to do." The door clicked shut, leaving David alone on the porch. Through the security camera, I watched him stand there for several minutes, the weight of his choices visible in every line of his body. Finally, he turned and walked away, not to his usual luxury car, repossessed this morning, but toward the bus stop at the corner. My phone buzzed, a message from Carol. "FBI just announced they're expanding the investigation to 3 more states." They're calling it one of the largest personal finance fraud cases in recent history. I smiled, watching David's retreating figure. He had wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. Now he was, just not in the way he'd planned. So, next week unfolded like a complex ballet of consequences. Each day brought new revelations, new developments, and new levels of fallout from Catherine's collapsed empire. I watched it all from my command center, documenting every detail while helping Emma navigate the storm. The morning after David's failed attempt to return home, the FBI announced they had uncovered connections to similar scams in 12 states. Catherine Wells, or whatever her real name was, hadn't just been running isolated cons. She'd been operating a sophisticated network of financial fraud that stretched back nearly a decade. "Look at this," Carol said, sending me a link to a federal database. "They've identified 23 different aliases so far. Catherine Wells wasn't even her first identity. She started as Rachel Morgan in Seattle back in 2015. I was reviewing the data when Emma knocked on my office door. She stood in the doorway, still in her practice clothes, looking more serious than any 14-year-old should have to be. "Mom," she said quietly, "can we talk about Dad?" I closed my laptop, giving her my full attention. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need." She sat down, fidgeting with the hem of her dance skirt. "His face is all over the news. The other girls at practice, their moms are talking. They're calling him the ballet betrayer now." I reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this." "Don't be," she said, surprising me with the strength in her voice. "I'm not ashamed. You know what I realized during practice today? Every time I fell learning a new move, every time I failed, I got back up. Dad. He fell once and betrayed everyone who loved him." Pride swelled in my chest. My daughter wasn't just a talented dancer, she was becoming a remarkably wise young woman. "There's something else," she continued, pulling out her phone. "The National Championship Committee called. They want to do a feature story about me, for their website, about perseverance in the face of adversity." I studied her face. "How do you feel about that?" "I think," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I think if my story can help other dancers, other kids whose parents let them down, then maybe something good can come from all this." Before I could respond, my security system pinged with an alert. Catherine had just been formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. The preliminary evidence suggested she could face up to 30 years in federal prison. "Mom?" Emma's voice brought me back to the moment. "Do you think Dad will go to jail too?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know, honey. The FBI is still investigating his role in everything. But what matters right now is that you're safe, your future is secure, and you can focus on your dancing." She nodded, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Was it you? The anonymous donor who saved my training camp?" "Spot?" I looked at my daughter, seeing the subtle intelligence in her eyes. She was too smart to be fooled for long. "What makes you think that?" "Because," she smiled slightly, "you're the only person I know who would turn Dad's betrayal into a way to protect me. Plus, I saw your screens when I walked in earlier. You're not just tracking the news, you're tracking everything." For a moment, I considered denying it, maintaining the mystery that had captured the dance world's imagination. But Emma deserved the truth. "The money for your training camp," I explained carefully, "came from the accounts David had hidden from us. I just made sure it found its way back to where it belonged." Emma's eyes widened. "Is that legal?" "Let's just say, I made sure justice was served in a way that focused on your future rather than revenge." She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she threw her arms around me. "Thank you, Mom. Not just for saving my spot, but for showing me what real strength looks like." As I held my daughter, my phone buzzed with updates. David's firm had officially terminated him. The FBI was expanding their investigation to include his earlier financial dealings. Catherine's network was continuing to unravel, revealing more victims, more stolen money, more lives disrupted. But none of that mattered as much as the girl in my arms. Emma had faced betrayal with grace, disappointment with determination, and was emerging stronger for it. "You know," she said, pulling back with a small smile, "I changed my solo for the Nationals." "Oh?" "Instead of the traditional piece I was going to do, I'm choreographing something new. It's about transformation, about rising from betrayal. I'm calling it digital justice." I couldn't help but laugh. "That's oddly appropriate." "I thought you'd appreciate it," she grinned. "After all, you're the one who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming stronger than you were before." Later that evening, as Emma practiced her new routine in our home studio, I received one final message from Carol. "Catherine's talking. She's naming names, dates, everything. Your plan worked better than we imagined." I watched my daughter through the studio's glass wall, her movements telling a story of strength and resilience. David and Catherine had thought they were so clever, using Emma's recital as cover for their betrayal. Instead, they'd given her the inspiration for a performance that would showcase not just her talent, but her triumph. Sometimes, I realized, the most powerful response to betrayal isn't bringing your enemies down, it's lifting yourself higher than they could ever imagine. Emma had learned that lesson far too young, but she was turning it into art, into strength, into something beautiful. And that, more than any revenge, was the perfect justice. 2 months after Catherine's arrest, I sat in the federal courthouse, watching as the woman who had almost destroyed my family stood before the judge. She looked different now. Gone were the designer clothes and confident smirk, replaced by a prison jumpsuit and defeated expression. Carol sat beside me, her presence steady and supportive. We'd become more than just allies in revenge. We'd forged a friendship born from shared determination and justice served. The defendant, Catherine Wells, also known as Rachel Morgan, Maria Torres. The prosecutor read through the list of aliases, each name another life she'd stolen, another family she'd destroyed. The list took nearly 5 minutes to complete. As the charges were read, I thought about how differently this could have ended. If I hadn't caught the transfer notification during Emma's recital, if Carol hadn't reached out, if we hadn't combined our skills and knowledge, Catherine might have disappeared again, ready to destroy more lives. "Your Honor," Catherine's lawyer began, "my client wishes to make a statement." The judge nodded, and Catherine stepped forward. She looked directly at me as she spoke, her voice carrying none of the smooth confidence she'd once possessed. "I've spent my life believing I was smarter than everyone else," she said, "that I had the right to take what I wanted because I could outsmart any system, any security, any person." She paused, swallowing hard. I was wrong. Carol shifted beside me, her posture tense. This was the woman who had destroyed her brother's life, who had left countless families in financial ruin. Any show of remorse now seemed too little, too late. "The prosecution has presented evidence of my crimes spanning nearly a decade," Catherine continued. "But what truly broke me, what made me realize the depth of my wrongdoing, was watching a 14-year-old girl turn my greatest victory into her triumph. I thought of Emma, currently at dance practice preparing for the national championships. Her new solo, Digital Justice, had already garnered attention from prestigious dance companies. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into art, into strength. "I don't expect forgiveness," Catherine said, her voice cracking. "I don't deserve it. But I want the court to know that I understand now. Every dollar I stole wasn't just money. It was dreams, futures, trust. And no amount of clever schemes or digital manipulation can make up for that." The judge listened, impassively, then delivered his sentence. 25 years in federal prison, No possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Full restitution to all identified victims. A lifetime ban from working in or adjacent to financial services. As Catherine was led away, Carol leaned over to whisper, "Did you ever imagine when you first saw that transfer notification that we'd end up here?" I shook my head. "I just wanted to protect my daughter's future. I gestured to the courtroom, the prosecutors gathering their papers, the media sketching the scene. This became something much bigger. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. They'd been following the case closely, dubbing it the ballet betrayal, a story that had captured national attention with its mix of financial crime, family drama, and artistic resilience. "Dr. Chen," they called out, "any comment on Catherine Wells's sentencing?" I paused on the courthouse steps, thinking carefully before responding. "Justice comes in many forms," I said finally. "Sometimes it's a prison sentence. Sometimes it's watching your child rise above betrayal to create something beautiful. Today, we saw both." My phone buzzed, a message from Emma. "Mom, just landed the triple turn in practice. Can't wait to show you. How did court go?" I smiled, showing Carol the message. "This is the real victory," I said. "Not Catherine's sentencing. Not the restitution, but this. My daughter focusing on her future instead of dwelling on betrayal." Carol nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know, when I first reached out to you, I was driven by revenge. I wanted Catherine to pay for what she did to my brother. But watching Emma turn this into inspiration, it's given all her victims something more valuable than revenge. Hope," I finished. "She gave them hope." Later that evening, I received an unexpected email from David's lawyer. He was pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for his cooperation in identifying more of Catherine's victims. The lawyer attached a letter David had written to Emma. I stared at the attachment for a long time before calling Emma into my office. "Your father wrote you a letter," I said softly. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to." Emma sat at my desk, her dance bag still slung over her shoulder. She looked at the screen, then at me. "Will you read it with me?" Together, we opened the letter. David's words were raw, honest in a way he'd never been before. He explained how he'd lost himself long before meeting Catherine, how his pride and greed had made him vulnerable to her manipulation. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, he thanked Emma for showing him what real strength looked like. "He watched my practice video," Emma said quietly. "The new solo." I looked at her, surprised. "How do you know?" "He mentions it here." She pointed to a paragraph. "Watching you dance about rising from betrayal made me realize how far I'd fallen." He really saw it, Mom. He finally saw me. I held my daughter as she processed this moment, this complex mix of pain and validation. David had lost everything, his freedom, his reputation, his family. But perhaps he'd gained something too. Understanding. My phone buzzed one last time, Carol sending me a news alert. The FBI had just announced that information from Catherine's case had led them to uncover 3 more major financial fraud rings. Our quest for personal justice had sparked something larger, a domino effect that would protect countless potential victims. "Mom?" Emma's voice pulled me back to the present. "I think I'm ready for nationals." I looked at my daughter, seeing the strength that had always been there, now tempered by experience but undiminished by pain. "You know what? I think you are too. Sometimes justice doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes it's not about punishment or revenge, but about transformation. About taking the worst moment of your life and turning it into a catalyst for something greater." As I watched Emma return to her practice, moving through the complex sequences of her new solo, I realized that this was the true ending to our story. Not Catherine in prison, not David's guilty plea, but this. A young dancer who had taken betrayal and turned it into art, pain into power, tragedy into triumph. And that was a performance worth watching. 6 months after Catherine's sentencing, I stood backstage at the National Youth Ballet Championships, watching Emma prepare for her moment. The past half year had transformed both of us in ways I never expected. The scandal, dubbed the ballet betrayal by the media, had faded from national headlines, but its impact lingered in more meaningful ways. The FBI's investigation, sparked by our exposure of Catherine's network, had led to the recovery of over $50 million in stolen funds across multiple states. More importantly, it had changed how financial institutions handled personal accounts, implementing new security measures to prevent similar schemes. 5 minutes, Emma? The stage manager called out. My daughter nodded, making final adjustments to her costume. The piece she was about to perform, Digital Justice, had evolved far beyond its original concept. What started as a response to betrayal had become a powerful statement about resilience and transformation. Dr. Chen? I turned to find Carol standing there, holding a bouquet of roses. After everything we'd been through together, she'd become like family, attending every one of Emma's performances. The FBI just released their final report, she said quietly, showing me her phone. Catherine's network was bigger than anyone imagined. They're still uncovering connections. I glanced at the article, noting how our simple act of revenge had spiraled into one of the largest financial fraud investigations in recent history. But that wasn't what mattered tonight. Mom? Emma's voice pulled me back to the present. She stood before me in her performance costume, a stunning blend of classical ballet and modern design. I have something to tell you. What is it, sweetheart? I got a letter from Dad yesterday. She pulled an envelope from her dance bag. He's been watching the videos of my practices that the prison lets me send him. He's actually watching now. I felt a complex mix of emotions. David had begun serving his reduced sentence, 5 years for his role in Catherine's schemes. His cooperation had helped identify dozens more victims, and he'd signed over every asset he had left to a restitution fund. He wrote that he finally understands what he missed all those years, Emma continued. Not just the performances, but the dedication, the growth, the person I was becoming. She smiled slightly. He said watching me dance about overcoming his betrayal made him face who he really was. Before I could respond, the stage manager called for places. Emma hugged me quickly, then took her position in the wings. I moved to the audience with Carol, finding our seats just as the lights dimmed. The announcer's voice filled the theater. Our next performer, Emma Chen, presenting her original piece, Digital Justice. The music began, a haunting blend of classical, symphony, and electronic elements that Emma had helped compose. She stepped onto the stage, her movements telling a story that the entire audience knew but had never seen expressed this way. Every gesture spoke of betrayal and resilience, each turn representing the twists of deception, each leap showing triumph over adversity. But it was the quieter moments that brought tears to my eyes, the subtle movements that showed how strength could come from vulnerability, how pain could be transformed into power. In the final sequence, Emma performed a series of increasingly complex turns, each one more precise than the last. The audience held its breath as she built momentum, approaching the move that had become her signature, a triple turn that seamlessly flowed into a leap, representing the moment of breaking free. As she stuck the landing perfectly, the theater erupted in applause. But Emma wasn't finished. The final moments of her piece showed something unexpected, a gesture of forgiveness, not weakness, but strength, acknowledging the past while refusing to be defined by it. When she took her final bow, the audience rose as one. Standing ovation didn't quite capture it. This was a recognition of something deeper, more profound than just technical excellence. Backstage after the performance, Emma was surrounded by other dancers, coaches, and representatives from prestigious ballet companies. Her story, combined with her undeniable talent, had caught the attention of the entire dance world. "Ms. Chen?" A woman in a crisp suit approached us. "I'm from the American Ballet Theater. We'd like to discuss Emma's future." As Emma engaged in conversation with the representative, my phone buzzed with a message from the prison where David was serving his time. "She was magnificent. Thank you for letting me see her shine." I showed the message to Carol, who squeezed my hand in understanding. "Sometimes," she said softly, "justice looks different than we expect." Later that night, after the medals had been awarded, Emma took gold. After the celebrations had quieted, we sat in our hotel room, mother and daughter, looking out over the city lights. "Mom," Emma said, her medal glinting in the darkness, "I've been thinking about everything that happened, about Dad and Catherine, about how you fought back." "Oh?" "You could have just called the police when you saw the transfer. You could have handled it the normal way. But you chose to fight back smart, to turn their weapons against them." I studied my daughter's face, seeing the wisdom there. "Sometimes, the best way to defeat darkness is to understand how it works." "That's what I wanted to show in my dance," she said. "Not just the pain of betrayal, but the power of understanding it, transforming it." She paused. I think I want to help others do the same." "What do you mean?" "The FBI agent who handled Dad's case? She says they need more people who understand both technology and human nature. Someone who can see patterns, who knows how to turn weakness into strength." I felt a surge of pride. My daughter wasn't just surviving trauma, she was finding purpose in it. "After I finish dance school," Emma continued, "I want to study cybersecurity, like you. But I want to use it to protect people before they get hurt, to catch the Catherine Welleses of the world before they destroy more families." I pulled her close, marveling at how this girl who had faced such betrayal could emerge not just stronger, but more compassionate. "You know what the hardest part of my solo was?" she asked suddenly. "The triple turn?" "No." She smiled. "The ending. Finding a way to show that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, that being strong doesn't mean being hard. Dad tried to steal my future, but in fighting back, I found a bigger one." As if on cue, my phone lit up with another message. Carol sending us the latest update. Catherine's case had inspired new legislation aimed at protecting families from financial fraud. They were calling it the Ballet Betrayal Bill. Emma read the message over my shoulder and laughed softly. "It's funny, isn't it? Dad and Catherine thought they were so clever, using my recital as cover. Instead, they gave me the inspiration for something that's helping change laws." I looked at my daughter, this amazing young woman who had taken betrayal and turned it into a beacon of hope for others. "Sometimes," I said, "the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better." Emma nodded, then stood up and moved to the center of the room. In the soft hotel lighting, she performed a single perfect turn, not for competition, not for audience, but for the pure joy of movement. And in that moment, watching my daughter dance not despite her pain but through it, I realized that this was the true ending to our story. Not the justice we'd achieved, not the changes we'd inspired, but this, a young woman who had taken the darkest moment of her life and turned it into light. That was the most powerful performance of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.